What really bothers me about reviewing sessions from students is when they don't think. What David's doing here is just snap betting one third box. He's like, oh, I have a fairly meh hand, I can get thin value. It's a lazy thought process. Ladies and gents, boys and girls, it's the return of one of your favourite shows of all time. Definitely your favourite poker show, possibly your favourite YouTube show, and very probably better than all of the shows you loved as a child. Maybe even better than Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's the return of brutal feedback. Don't be a lunatic. What are you doing? This is absolutely maniacal and stupid. And today's guest, today's student, he's not really a guest because he's not here. I wouldn't say the things I'm going to say to his face. You know, this guy's a boxer, so I'm glad he's not here. But I'll tell you what, guys, it's going to be me landing all of the punches on David's game today. And if he continues to make mistakes, having done tuition, it's going to be a really bad advert for Carrot Corner in general and for me as a coach. So I'm not going to tolerate any sloppiness today. I'm not going to tolerate blunders. I'm going to be really frank with you guys and with David. Let's punch the shit out of David's game. Because he's not here to punch me in the face in real life. So let's do it. We're off and running. Ace Queen of Spades on the button. Good start. Let's see if David can embarrass me here. The way to embarrass me in this spot is going to be to 4-bet or to fold. Can he do it? Let's count the number of times David humiliates the brand, the teaching brand of Carrot Corner. Not this time. Good stuff. Okay. Small bet on the flop. You could build some raises here. I think call only as a strategy when you're continuing with your range is a good plan here. And then we face this turn check. You can tell from the way the mouse cursor is beginning to dart around on the screen. That's this enlarged cursor here. Don't know if David has a sight impairment or something. That's a very obnoxiously big cursor. It's bigger than the pot, actually. But when he darts this around, you can tell he's beginning to think. The cogs are beginning to turn, and we're clearly considering some form of turn bet. How do we consider a form of turn bet? Do we just pick a sizing and go? Of course not. What we should do is pick just one sizing for all of our range. That should be our protocol. If our range is going to bet, it's a bit like taking a gun into a level of a computer game. You've only got room for one gun. Let's say you choose the assault rifle. That means that you cannot fire the pistol or the shotgun or the grenade launcher on that level. It doesn't mean that you go around just spraying bullets everywhere that you never stop firing. So there are hands you fire with here and hands that you don't. There are times that you shoot your weapon of whatever sizing you've picked before you get into it, and times that you don't. But let's start by picking the weapon. What is the gun we want to take to this node? Well, I would begin here by asking, where's the bottom of my value range? What do my value hands want to do? Because these are really going to be the thing that drives the bus in this respect. And I think my value bets here are going to be something like 2-pair plus, maybe ace-queen plus. I don't think there's any point in really reopening the action here with a hand like ace-5 or king-queen or king-jack or anything marginal, because you're going to face some raises, in theory at least. Villain does have some slow plays on a turn like this, stuff that would block our continuing range if he starts betting, so he's going to slow play some ace-king, kings, aces, stuff like this, maybe even 10 sometimes, although I think that's a bit more apt to bet. But yeah, there's going to be a protected checking range in theory, so the theoretical take would just be only reopen the action here if it's going to be a big sizing. I don't think there's much point building a small bet here, even if the solver does it sometimes. So I would use big bets here. Ace-queen seems marginal. I don't think it's bad to bet this hand and then check back river, though that's kind of separate to what we're doing here. The thing with this sizing is you're kind of reopening the action without any major purpose. Like, you could easily check this hand, right? And most of the other hands you want to bet, you bet big with. So be interested to know what the thought process is actually going into that. But overall, I think you've just got to be kind of consistent with your logic there and just say, okay, what size will my range use? What gun do I bring to the level? And then do I shoot it with this hand and how often? Okay, 10-8. Go for an open from the hijack. A little bit loose. I like this hand though because it's clubs. Clubs is the best suit, in case you guys didn't know. Snap check back on this flop. Okay. Okay, what is going on? So, unless I'm insane, this board is basically a range bet, in theory. So by checking, we're already deviating. It's not to say that this is like a big error in a vacuum, but why are we deviating? Like, what is our protocol here? Are we expecting people to misplay more against check than against bet? Because if not, we should just bet. The reason that you want to bet hands like this in situations that are really good for your range is that your opponent is not incentivized, theoretically speaking, to do a lot of betting on the next street. So if you imagine the world is really good for his range, and really good for your range, sorry, and really bad for his, you're just not going to see him make a ton of random bets with air on the turn. So what you actually get by slow playing here and bluff catching isn't a lot of EV. In fact, any turn bet is going to render your hand pretty much indifferent, because theoretically speaking, villain is only meant to lead the turn really big and with a lot of combos that completely smash 10-8 or are bluffs. I think what's going to happen here in reality is similar to this. People understand this is not a great spot for their range. They're going to be checking a ton here, and therefore I would just bet the flop. I think just taking the thin value denial right away on the flop, the denial of equity, that is, the thin value of betting a hand with about 60-something% equity, is fine, and in spots that are fantastic for your range, don't rely on your opponent making investments. They're not meant to, and that's why a solver will generally just bet everything on a board that's good for them. They get more value because they have a ton of hands that are just doing really well. Bluffing is super good as well if we had a hand like 4 or 5 on the flop here, because fold equity is through the roof, and quite rightly so, due to our big range advantage. And thirdly, denial, the ability to protect your hand. I don't like the word protection because it sounds like something you got to do. I gotta protect my equity, right? It's kind of a bad term, but whatever, that aside for now, I think it's better the trade-off you get for denial reasons on the flop when the flop is great for your range, because your opponent is just folding tons and tons of hands with live pair draws, and there's not as much of a downside. Like, you're not getting continued against often enough to really force you to like pay the price for that. So I don't really love the snap check back here. It's kind of lazy and automatic, and it's like it's almost assuming some kind of premise that we're not range betting. It's kind of saying like, oh, I have a substantial check in range here, so I snap check back this middling hand. It doesn't make sense to check back 10-8 in a spot where your range should be betting like 100% of the time. So I'd like to see just a range bet there. So this is an interesting spot where, again, we should try and choose a weapon for the level. Like, do we want a big bet? Do we want a small bet on the turn there? I think it's safe to say that just using big bets here is totally fine. You will see some solvers use like little bets here too, because they have a more capped range now with a thinner value region. I would probably just go big or not bother here, just as a simplification. With 10-8, you shouldn't really be able to bet this hand very often in theory. Like, it's definitely mostly a check, if not a pure check. Probably a pure check. But the thing with this hand is, in practice, people don't protect this turn checking range as well as they should, and therefore I don't actually mind an exploitative practice of like just betting small with this hand when you're against a recreational player here, because they're not protecting their checking range enough on the turn, and your hand is upgraded therefore from like a hand with loads of equity to a hand with an absolute ton of equity. So I don't hate a small bet there exploitatively, but a check is good. And then river, we have a very clear value bet of check to, and a very clear call or raise depending on villain sizing when we face a bet. More likely a call with this kicker. We go for this sizing very quickly. What really bothers me about reviewing sessions from students is when they don't think. It's like you're in a spot and you have a puzzle to solve, and the puzzle has just been put in front of you. And because poker is a game that throws completely unique puzzles at you all the time, maybe there's a bit of patterning to them, but you've never seen 8 king deuce 4 king before, right, in this configuration. So think about it. Try and get your head around the ranges, the board, the situation. What we're doing here, what David's doing here, is just snap betting 1/3 box. He's like, oh, I have a fairly meh hand, I can get thin value. It's a lazy thought process. This hand is way better than just betting 1/3 here. This hand is winning, in theory, like 85% of the time now, and in practice probably 95% of the time against 3 checks. There's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't go bigger with this hand. In fact, it's probably a blunder to bet small, because humans are not raising you at the same frequency as a solver is, so you can't rely on villain like bluff raising you here or getting any EV that way. So what's basically going on here is that they will overfold massively to this bet size that you've picked here. They will probably overfold to like a bigger bet too, but by less of a margin, because the thing is that when they have a pair here, they're very often bluff catching, and people don't find ace high bluff catches. So I actually think you really need to just go bigger here against humans and in game theory as well. I think this is lazy. I think this is sloppy. I don't really love the idea of just being like, oh, I have 1/3 pot. Like, what you're ignoring here is the fact that it checked all the way to the river. You have to factor in that action sequence before you just like instantly pick a bet size. I don't like this. You can see I have an innate ability to absolutely shred things that look completely normal. It's like, oh, I did a good job. You know, I got thin value from a 4. The 4 calls a bigger bet like every single time. This is the thing. The population in that spot is completely inelastic to sizing. Like, They're not bluff catching enough ace high for your tiny bet, and they're not folding pairs to your bigger bet there by and large. So just go bigger with value. You could talk about going smaller exploitatively for a bluff because it's just super good. Okay, fold jack 9. But yeah, for value, I would definitely go bigger. And I think the game theory is a little off there. I think that's a clear tier 2 hand as we describe it in the Carrot Poker School, which, if you're watching this after my birthday of 2022, my birthday is the 25th of June. If you want to send me some stuff or use it to hack into like my online banking, you can do either. And yeah, after that, the Carrot Poker School is going to be on sale. It's going to be live, so you can 4-bet this hand or fold. You could maybe call it a higher stakes with lower rake structure. I think at these stakes, you don't really want to be doing that. This is a 50 NL game, I believe, on GG. I don't really care. I just look at big blinds. Big blinds are more important, right? I love to see that the student has a display in big blinds here. A6 is not going to be a 3-bet in these positions. We need to be a bit more selective with the caliber of the suited aces that we're getting involved when we're in a tighter configuration, like hijack cutoff, open 7s, get a call, queen jack 8. This is a board I wouldn't bet my range on. I'd use probably small bets if I bet here. The reason for that, taking the pistol to the level of the game and not the shotgun, if you will, is that the flop is fairly uncapping to your opponent's range at the very top, and that means that you're not advantage, and the number of hands in your own range that crave a very large and very high investment ceiling that need to like climb all the way up to that by the river are not many. 10-9 is shared, 8s is shared, a lot of 2-pair is shared, so there's really no reason to use big bets on queen jack 8. I would consider big bets on like queen jack 4 two-tone or 8 3-deuce rainbow or something where you have a bigger nut advantage in your range. Remember, range advantage and nut advantage, not the same thing. Then we check back with 7s because this is a hand that would never opt to use a big bet. It's a little bit too showdown value-y and just dead. Hands that use big bets, guys, are typically hands that are not totally dead and showdown value at the same time. You can have a dead hand making a big bet, right? Like if you have like 7-6, I don't really care. You can probably bet, but I don't like doing it with 7s because the check EV is just a little bit too high. So far so good. Turn is a very standard check here as well. Please don't embarrass me. Don't do anything. Please don't bet. Thank you. No. What are you... Why haven't we checked yet? Oh my god, he scares me. Because it's going to be a really bad advert for my brand. Like, no one's going to buy my course if he bets there, right? Ever. You guys are going to be like, oh, this is a Pete Clark student and he just bet the turn here. I'm not buying the Carrot Poker School. So I hope you know, David, that thousands and tens of trillions of pounds are riding on this video and how well you perform. Easy river check. No, please don't be a lunatic. What are you doing? This is absolutely maniacal and stupid. This is bad. Yeah. I mean, your hand shows down for tons of EV, and you're turning it into bluff, and it's not even clear that villain has any hands that actually, like, fold here that are better. Okay, like, he might have an 8 and then randomly fold it, but what kind of construction are you building here for your strategy? You're taking a hand that's winning a ton by checking and hoping that villain dramatically overfolds all of the better hands in his range as a region. Like, he has to really overfold that region before betting becomes as good as checking. No doubt this play is plus EV, but you're not trying to do something that's plus EV. You're trying to do something that's actually good. And here what you're doing is relying on having an absolute ton of fold equity whenever villain has a stronger hand than you, but actually your line makes no sense because your turn check is completely capping and the river is a 3 and you've opened EP and you don't even have 3s. So actually, if villain is thinking here, there are 0 combos of value hands in your range. Because, okay, you could maybe have like a queen that you've decided to upgrade into a 2x pot river overbet. I don't think anyone expects you to do that, and I kind of know for a fact that you don't do that with a queen. Okay, not for a fact, but I'm highly confident that you don't. So your range here, to anyone that's thinking, doesn't have a strong enough hand to overbet for value because of your flop and turn play, but then is suddenly overbetting on a card that doesn't uncap your range. This makes no sense. This is spew, and it's a big error. Guys, don't buy the Carrot Poker School. It will make you play like this. I'm just kidding. Clearly, the Carrot Poker School is one of these courses that it's super dense and there's a lot of stuff in there, and it doesn't actually have a section on when to not randomly spew overbet the river because you're recording a video for YouTube. It doesn't have that section. I could add it now. Now I'll need to edit it and add it. The tank fold is like the best results-oriented outcome ever for that spot. It's like when villain tank folds, you actually probably made him fold a better hand. The play's still garbage though. Remember, this is brutal feedback. I am contracted to be really mean. So when you're watching this, David, just remember that it's in the contract that you've signed up for that I'm really mean here. I know that David can take a bit of harsh criticism anyway. Otherwise, I wouldn't be landing all these blows, right? Don't feel bad, Pete. Just get on with the shredding. This is the premise of the show. Let's go. See, I'm too nice. Way too nice. 5-4. You can do this sometimes. I don't hate this. I think against a recreational, it's totally cool to just ISO them when you know you're going to make an open-end straight flush draw. Betting flop with range and stuff is fine here. You don't really have to build much of a checking range. I think I would just always bet turn here. Your hand is ridiculously good. You won't get jammed on very often here. You can kind of like cry yourself to sleep if you get jammed on here, but it should happen irrelevantly infrequently. So nice play. You've redeemed yourself there. That river overbet really irked me, but you've definitely redeemed yourself with the 5-4. Good job. Alright, pocket tens. Go ahead and make a little open, get a call. Ace 7-6. Not a good board for range here. You want to do a load of checking in these situations in general. I don't like the small bet because what your small bet's doing here is kind of assuming that your range wants to bet a lot in this spot. This is a texture that kind of sucks for you because the 7 and the 6 are really common set making cards. The ace is flatted at a fair frequency as well, and villain just has way less of the offsuit Broadway region that completely whiffs this flop. So the fact that you have umpteen combos of king jack, king 10, king 9, queen jack off, queen 10 off, etc. when you open hijack is disastrous for your range on this board. And this is a board that solvers are going to check really frequently. So betting small with the middle of your range here quickly implies that you're betting range in a spot where you should probably be checking range. Go and look these spots up in a solver and have a look at what they say. This is not a situation where you really want to build much of a betting range. I think it's bad protocol. It's not like the line itself is bad and you start to hemorrhage tons of money, but I think your approach to these spots is definitely not right. By the way, guys, if you hire me for private coaching, I'm much nicer than I am on brutal feedback. I don't advertise my coaching as brutal feedback on my website. You'll note that, right? If you go there, if you go to carrotcorner.com, you will not see me say, want to get your game shredded? Send a video here and send money. No, we don't do that. Okay, 5-4, we can go either way. The thing is, right, on this flop, probably you're building like a big shotgun kind of bet. You're like, boom, big bet when you bet this flop. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're just like, with a pistol. I don't know. Either way, it's probably fine. But with this hand, you can bet, regardless of sizing. You have backdoor straight draws, you have low cards. If you're mixing bet with check here, I don't really care. Like, you can delay your c-bet here. But do you know what? See, against a weaker player, I kind of just like betting. And the reason I like betting against weaker players with hands that are flimsy but really quite prosperous on certain turn cards is just that you probably don't get raised enough right away. So that's a good thing. The raise frequency is not what it should be, so bet just becomes quite nice. And secondly, weaker players lead turns with absolute disregard for the fact that they're in a disadvantageous world, range versus range. So recreational players, very often, the turn will be a 3 here. And unbeknownst to them, their range is really suffering, but they have like king 5 and they're just like, bet, you checked, I bet. You checked, therefore I bet. It's like really advanced, really intelligent logic, right? It's like quite sophisticated. Check, therefore I bet. So when we face that kind of really quite astute scientific logic, we need to be careful. We need to make sure that we're not just checking back tons of bad hands on the flop and then pitching turn, because we're going to realize less equity and less fold equity on the branches where we check here than we are against good players a lot of the time, because they're going to just lead turn with like absolute reckless abandon sometimes. So I quite like just betting flop there, and I do hope that you're considering betting 5 high on the flop, because you should be building a polarized flop betting range and not just routinely checking this hand because it's bad or it's lousy or I want a better hand to bluff with. This is all absolute dreadful logic. Like, it's embarrassingly bad logic when people are like, oh, just bluff with queen jack here. No. You don't just bluff with queen jack. You bluff with all sorts of bluffs if you want to make your opponent indifferent to calling. If you want to make it the case that you're playing like a moron and villain can just fold basically everything to your c-bet, then sure, just only bet with queen jack. And I'm not saying David's doing this, I'm sure he's not, but the point is that you guys out there, some of you are probably like rejecting 5-4 as a flop bluff here, and you shouldn't be. You need to take a good hard look at yourself if you're rejecting 5-4 as a flop bluff here, right? You've just got to do that. Okay, big bet on the turn is good. Again, you don't need the flush draw to do that. Having the flush draw is nice, but you don't need it. You can do it with other hands too. I think when you face the second check on the turn there, you're like literally dealing with a range that's like absurdly underprotected. Why do we keep getting dealt the 4 of diamonds? Like 4 of diamonds in every single hand. Are you seeing? And the 5 of diamonds. Look at this. Just getting the 5 and 4 of diamonds over and over again. But yeah, when you get checked to on this turn, it's basically just the guy has nothing and is giving up on the pot 80% of the time, even though it should only be like 60 or something. You're meant to get a ton of fold equity here in GTO because it's a good world for your range, bad world for your opponent's range. You're not meant to be getting like 80% though, but you probably are. So I think just always betting this hand on the turn is correct. I think checking here is a misplay, even though GTO would be like, it's fine. But if you lock the solver to say that actually villain's range was really, really weak when he checks turn a second time here, the solver would always bet as well, right? It would change its mind. Ace 4. Oof, this is quite interesting. So basically you're dead. Basically you lose, right? Like villain has aces, kings, queens, ace, king. Ace queen suited, maybe jacks, tens, something he's going to stack off with. This is a recreational player that's just 4-bet U-button versus small blind. So if you shove here, you absolutely hemorrhage money for no reason at all. Like you must absolutely hate money if you shove here. Let's see if he shoves. Good. You like to give us a sweat here. You like to give us a sweat here on Brutal Feedback. I'm actually getting amped up. I'm getting ready to shred. The hairs on my arms are standing up. I'm feeling that kind of tense way. Yeah, man. Getting ready for some fight in that spot. But you did make the right choice, and now I need to calm down in time. Okay, see with 6-3. See when some other fellow Dutch guy, someone with the same nationality as you, limps your blind? That's a direct affront. That's like an actual insult. You can't allow this to happen. Oh, he raised. Never mind. Anyway. 6-3, you gotta defend it against a fellow countryman, right? You can't let your countrymen bully you. People from other countries, it's like, okay, we've got international sort of diplomacy to think about here. There's tensions. We need to like maybe be a bit more amicable. But people from your own country, you may as well just attack them, right? There's no danger to that. So 6-3 here, I think calling is fine. It's like very, very close. But yeah, 2 low cards that are suited are gonna play fine here. Flop, you should be mixing bet and check. I would use a big bet strategy on ace 8-4. Because I only really want to bet like top pair plus and bluffs, you could use a smaller bet and bet some 8x too. When there's a medium to low card on the board that's relevant, that's like kind of one you have a lot, you can build a smaller bet around it for value and denial. But I also like just betting big here. I think I just choose a big bet on the flop. You can definitely bet 6-3. You should be betting it a decent amount of the time. You actually want to block diamonds here and unblock the dead suits, and you want to have the redraw of the straight and flush draws. So I think high betting frequency on the flop. Let's actually dissect David's flop check here. How quickly does he check back here? How do you decide? Like, I'm looking at this process here, right? Let's watch this one more time. Let's watch this deliberation. Bet small, check. I might bet small, check. It's like, I might bet small, check. In the spot. It's like, this is a very strange thought process to have. Okay, so I'm considering betting, so check. Just done. It's like suddenly this thought came that was just like, check! And it just overwhelmed the rest of the thought process. Okay, here's how you should do it. On the flop. You should say, will I use big or small bets in my range, first of all? I'm going to pick big, but I don't hate the small idea here either. I think both are kind of optional, but usually in these float bet spots, grade 1, lecture 8, Carrot Poker School, we go for bigger bets. And the reason we do that is just it's simple to build a betting range around top pair plus and bluffs. This is clearly a bluff candidate that's good enough to bet. Even though the world isn't great for your range, this hand is just strong enough to bet equity-wise, redraw-wise, not potential-wise. So I would roll in a bet with it a certain amount of the time. I would say that I'm betting this hand more than the global frequency for my range. If my range is betting on average, let's say like 35% of the time, which is a good guess for this spot in my opinion, hand could be betting 50%. I don't think we rolled it. I don't know, maybe we did. Maybe we have an RNG somewhere off screen that I can't see, but it was like a very, very quick, like, I'm going to check. So I don't know, I think it's a little bit scattered and we could consolidate there a little bit. So, yeah. Facing a bet here, having checked back flop, I wouldn't be building raises here. I think just calling is the play. You need to think about, like, what would your range actually want to raise with here for value? Like queen 8 maybe, and would it even need to? You're in position, you can just call and bet river. Urgency for inflating pots is actually lower in position when you're facing a bet, but higher in position when you're facing a check. So you can definitely just slow play queen 8 here, and you block some bet calls anyway. It's not really a big deal. When we get this river, we can go very big for value when check to. We can raise small bets. We can call giant bets. Let's just see what happens. Yeah, I'm definitely raising. Take your time here. Don't like launch it in immediately. You'd want to think about it if you were bluffing. Just make sure you take your time there. It was a little bit fast. We're on 2x speed, sure, but that was still a little bit fast. All right, let's do this hand and then wrap up. Aces, cold call. With the guy still to bet here, I think this hand makes a pretty good check. The reason for this is that this player is going to be like, they check to me, I have sevens bet. Most of the time. It'd be rare for this player to actually be like, okay, the pre-flop raiser is checking his whole range here, or checking a lot of his range here. This player still has a completely uncapped range from having checked out of the big blind procedurally. I shouldn't just pure bet all of my pairs, I should mix some check with them, but more likely, he's going to have the caveman thought process of bet. That's going to be his thought process. It's going to be a really admirable, complicated thought process, and it's going to sound like this. Bet. So we should be careful of that. And I think checking here is fine, because he's going to just bet too often, basically. And if he doesn't bet, he probably just doesn't have a pair anyway. The only disadvantage to checking here is that you let a street roll off sometimes against this guy's pair that you could have value bet against and got pot building against, but it's not the end of the world. Now, on the queen turn, I think aces is a very good hand. Urgency has gone up again. I think this player will lead a lot of queens here just in practice, more so than they should, so I think this checking range is too weak. I don't actually hate checking again here and going for a check raise. It's a really nice way to just punish this guy for just betting too often when he's checked to twice. People are very bad at understanding how mediocre their hand is when they have like some pocket pair here, or if they have like queen 10, I think they just always bet or nearly always bet this spot. So again, I think check raising is totally fine with aces here. I don't have a massive preference. We go for a really big bet. I think that's all right as well. I don't think it's a mistake or anything. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, I'm sure David didn't, but if you enjoyed it, definitely smash that like button. It really helps me grow the channel and produce more episodes of Brutal Feedback very soon. We'll keep going with this show. Let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. I apologize to David for my harsh tone. It was necessary. You've got to put these students in their place. See you next time, guys. Bye for now. Check out carrotcorner.com for everything else from me. See you later.